What's up, guys? Welcome back to Outdoor Tactics. My name is Robert. We're officially 90 days out from the archery opener here in Ohio, and I'm sure across the nation you guys are feeling the pressure just the same as I am. And broadheads are a huge decision before you head out into the woods. And there are typically two categories of broadheads that people explore, and that's going to be mechanical broadheads and fixed blade broadheads. Today we're going to outline the pros and cons of each and what might sway you to decide one way or the other. And if you're new to hunting, this should be really helpful to you on deciding which way you want to go. And if you're a more seasoned and experienced hunter, this might just give you some good food for thought. We're also going to talk about some specific X factors that aren't necessarily listed on a spec sheet when you decide to go with fixed over mechanical or vice versa. So with all that being said, let's get started. Oof. So we're going to kick this off talking about the tried and true fixed blade broadhead. Now right here I have a Magnus Black Hornet 4-blade cut on contact fixed blade broadhead. I can highly recommend these broadheads. I have absolutely no relationship with Magnus broadheads, but they have been really high quality, very accurate, and very sharp out of the package in all of my experience using them, which has been quite a lot. As you can see, the fixed blade design has no moving parts. It's extremely simple and is essentially just a triangle on a stick, just as our ancestors used to use to put food on the table. We have come very, very far technologically, but some things just stay the same. This head has a 1 1/8 inch cutting diameter and a couple of offset bleeder blades down the back there that just aid in adding a little bit of extra wound channel. So let's talk pros of fixed blade broadheads first and foremost, and then we'll move into the cons, because there are honestly a few things that you're going to notice when you shoot fixed blade broadheads. They're going to make your time a little bit more difficult in getting your bow ready for season. So the biggest pro to a fixed blade is going to be their durability and their simplicity and their reliability. Since there are no moving parts, it's very, very hard to get one of these to fail, especially if it's a high quality design like one of the Magnus heads here. And also, typically with a fixed blade broadhead, the most damage you're going to incur is some chipping on the edge if you do hit some really hard bone or maybe a rock out the other side of the deer, or a little bit of tip deformation, which can generally be remedied by the use of a Tonto tip design, which you can kind of see right there the Magnus does have. So they're very, very durable. They've survived everything I've put them through personally, and I've seen no issues with that whatsoever. And if you do break them, you can just warranty them through Magnus and they will send you a new one, which is mega based. I will also say that fixed blade broadheads are generally made with a higher quality steel than mechanical broadheads as well. Now this is kind of a game of averages. Obviously the highest quality mechanical is going to be better steel than the lowest quality fixed blade, and trust me, there's a lot of low quality fixed blades made out of some strange Chinesium metal out there on the market. But as a whole, and on the average, fixed blade broadheads are going to be made with better steel, simply because you can cut this steel or forge this steel directly into the shape and not have to do any moving parts. And it just makes it easier to design around a high quality tool steel. But that high quality steel is going to help you out in durability and edge retention as it moves through the animal. One other big point that people talk about in the world of deer hunting is arrow penetration. I am a big proponent of an exit wound, preferably if you're shooting from an elevated position, an exit wound that ends up lower than your entry wound. Fixed blade broadhead is going to give you, on the average, a higher likelihood of getting a full pass through, simply because they are narrower and more efficient at cutting because of that. Just imagine you were pushing this through any surface, any material, and you made it wider. That would increase the resistance on your arrow and then decrease your penetration. So thinner broadheads, obviously if you get too small, you're not lethal enough, are typically going to penetrate deeper than wide cutting mechanicals. One very convenient perk of using fixed blade broadheads is that they're very often able to be reused, resharpened, and essentially kept around for years if you take care of the steel and keep it lightly oiled. They are a really simple cutting tool, right? There's not a whole lot to go wrong, and as long as it doesn't bend the steel into a shape that you can't sharpen back out with a file or something, they are going to last you years, and you should have something in your toolbox that you can just keep reusing and resharpening. Now, unfortunately, life is not perfect and always easy when you decide to hunt with fixed blade broadheads. They are going to require quite a bit more tuning with your bow to get them to fly straight. If you can imagine, this catching air up on the front of the arrow is going to catch air just like your veins, and this is a bad example because I don't have this arrow fletched yet, but moving on. By adding that drag to the front of the arrow, they are not going to fly with your field points. They're going to do something called planing, where they'll catch air in a certain direction coming off your bow, and that will divert their course through the air, and they won't hit with your field points. No bueno. What does this mean for you? You have to tune your bow, right? And tuning your bow is tedious, and it's not the most fun thing in the world, but there's a ton of videos online about how to do it, and your local archery shop can generally get you pretty close with paper tuning and stuff like that. But you cannot shoot an out-of-tune bow if you want to shoot fixed blade broadheads. Now, the dirty little industry secret is that you can't shoot mechanicals with an untuned bow either. I mean, you can, they might hit the same way, but you're not going to get efficient arrow flight. If that arrow's coming off the bow, canted in any direction, and those vanes have to pick up the slack and straighten out the arrow as it flies, you're losing a ton of energy as that arrow moves downrange. Whereas if it had just been in tune and come off your arrow cleanly, then you would be retaining more energy and thus getting more penetration back for free. Also, fixed blades are generally going to be smaller diameter than mechanicals, which means you're not going to catch as much stuff as the arrow moves through the deer, and you're going to have a smaller wound channel. There are advantages to having a wider broadhead. Some people go with 1.5 inches, some people go with 3/4 of an inch, whatever's legal in your state and your area. But wider broadheads are just going to do more damage, right? It's pretty obvious. And also, if you make a marginal hit, say you sort of accidentally tuck that arrow back towards the liver, if you have a slightly wider broadhead, you'd be more likely to clip the lungs on the way through instead of just having a full-on liver hit, which is always not the best experience to go find a deer after making. So those are the pros and cons of a fixed blade broadhead in a nutshell. Let's move on to a mechanical broadhead. Okay, now there are a lot of mechanical broadheads on the market today, but if you're going to talk about mechanicals, you have to talk about Rage. Rage broadheads are very widely known as one of the most popular mechanical broadheads on the market. Also, they used to have the best commercials back in the day when I watched TV. Now there are a ton of mechanicals coming out every single year, and they each have their own merit and they each have their own designs that make them better or worse in their own way. So let's get into the pros for using a mechanical. One of the biggest pros is that gnarly cutting diameter. This is the 2-inch model from Rage, and you know, a 2-inch cut through a deer is going to open up a really, really wide wound cavity and cause a lot of bleeding and a lot of tissue damage as it moves through the animal. Now, in its folded form, this is going to fly very similar to a field point. Now, everybody says they fly just like field points. They don't necessarily fly just like field points out to extended ranges, just because this geometry is different than a field point, so it is going to change point of impact slightly. But it's less drag than a fixed blade broadhead will generate. Obviously, the black hornet that I showed you earlier is going to generate more. Now, you definitely still shouldn't shoot these out of an untuned bow. You shouldn't fire an untuned bow at a deer to begin with, but if you're really, really, really in crunch time to get out there for season and you had to pick up a broadhead and your field points are flying 6 inches to the right at 20 yards, but these are hitting 1 inch to the right at 20 yards, I guess I would rather see you take these out in the field with you. But with today's understanding and the amount of media out there about bow hunting, there is no excuse not to have a fully tuned bow, and it is your responsibility as a hunter to have an ethical means of take, and an untuned bow, in my opinion, just isn't. Now, the biggest pro for a mechanical broadhead are the blood trails. I have got videos of blood trails that I cannot put online because they will immediately get taken down. When you put a Rage broadhead through the pump house of a deer and you maybe sharpen the blades on your own and you get a full pass through and you catch both lungs, maybe top of the heart, the blood trail that ensues is absolutely violent. As far as getting speedy expiration out of your animals, these are unmatched when you get a full pass through with something like a 2-inch cutting Rage. There are also 4-blade mechanicals on the market now that absolutely bore a hole through that target animal, and they are just an improvement on the design and even more cutting diameter and therefore even more blood flow, drop in blood pressure, and speedy expiration. So those are the outlined pros of using a mechanical broadhead like the Rage. Now, just like the fixed blade heads, there is no free lunch when it comes to choosing any one of these designs. You have to take the cons into account. So let's get into the issues with using mechanical broadheads. Now, you remember earlier when I mentioned that fixed blades generally have the highest quality steel? Well, in comparison to that, on the average, mechanical broadheads typically have lower quality steel. Lower quality steel means less structural integrity, more likelihood to bend out of shape when they impact bone or pretty much anything that perhaps you weren't aiming for, and that can also lead to edge integrity being compromised. As you can see here, if I put some lateral pressure on this blade, it does bend, right? So this is a fairly flexible metal, and if it goes through that animal and it twists, it can definitely change the intended design to an unintended design, and even though it is passing through that animal and it is cutting, it's definitely not doing it in the way it was intended, and it's not doing it as efficiently as it could. Also, edge retention is a huge deal. Sharpness of your broadhead is a huge deal. I will be putting out a video soon on why sharpness matters so much. But essentially, the sharper the broadhead is, regardless of the cutting diameter, the more damage it's going to do to those blood vessels, the better blood trail you're going to get, faster drop in blood pressure, and quicker expiration of that animal. So edge integrity is a big deal for me, and the mechanicals lose that battle fairly handily to a high quality fixed blade head. It's just sort of the way it is. Also, a big negative about mechanical broadheads is you have to trust that they're going to open. This one uses a polymer collared design in order to hold it together, and then there's two little tabs in the back of the blade that essentially push that plastic out of the way when this hits a solid surface like so. You can see these two little tabs here on the top. When those impact something solid, it will push those blades out to the side and deploy. What if the broadhead doesn't deploy? What if it goes through just like this? Then you have what's more akin to a field point than a broadhead going through that animal, and you're going to have very, very poor results with blood trailing, recovery in general, and that would then be considered a failed design in my opinion. Also, the opening mechanism here costs energy to open. How much energy? I'm not really sure. But the energy stored in your arrow is what allows it to penetrate through that animal, and when it spends energy in order to open up these blades, like so, you are losing that energy in your arrow. Also, with a wider diameter means less penetration. So not only are you spending energy to open it, you're then spending double the energy, since it's a 2-inch cut versus a 1-inch cut. You're then spending double the energy per inch that you penetrate through that animal, and you may not get a full pass-through. I would say, on the average, with an out-of-the-box mechanical broadhead versus a hand-sharpened, high-quality fixed-blade broadhead, you're going to get less penetration. And on average, if all things kept equal, you are more likely to not get a pass-through with a mechanical broadhead. Now, I've seen it done. I've done it myself. It does happen. It does work. But again, on the average, if you were to shoot 1,000 animals 1,000 times in a row, you would probably have more pass-throughs with a fixed-blade broadhead than you would with a mechanical. So those are the pros and cons on paper, right? Things that you can kind of discern just from looking at them and kind of theorizing in your head. You don't really have to go out into the field and take shots on deer to confirm or deny a lot of the theoretical ideas that I've put forth in the video so far. But each of these broadheads also have a little bit of an X factor, something that you don't really take into account when you read the box or the spec sheet online, and that you can pretty much only figure out from going out in the field and actually taking shots on game with these broadheads. So I want to get into some of those really quick, and these are really where I started to shift my opinion on fixed versus mechanical. So here's the big X factor. When you're selecting broadheads in general, I really don't care what brand or what model or anything like that, but if you are deer hunting or hunting any animal in general, they are moving targets 100% of the time. Now, deer move at the shot. I don't think I've ever experienced a time where I took a shot with a bow on a whitetail and my arrow impacted exactly where my pin was sitting. Sometimes I'll throw a shot an inch or two in a certain direction, and that's just being human. But sometimes the shot's perfect, the arrow is headed towards your intended target, and then the deer drops or turns away from you, and that ends up modifying your point of impact, right? Sometimes that point of impact can be worse on your broadhead than was originally intended. If you're tucking an arrow behind the shoulder, which I generally recommend as close to the shoulder as you can safely get, if they whirl around or they drop and they feed you that scapula and you end up having to go through that scapula to get into the heart and lungs, this broadhead is going to underperform compared to the fixed blade. Just because, again, that mechanism has to open. That costs energy. Then even if it opens, it has to bore a 2-inch hole through that bone, and that's going to cost more energy versus this, where it's immediately starting to cut on contact, and making it through that bone is, in my experience, not a big deal. Now, if I had it my way, they would just stand there like 3D targets, and I could just tuck the arrow exactly where I want it every single time. They wouldn't move and they wouldn't change the game on me. In that case, I would be shooting this because the wider cutting diameter is what I want. I want better blood trails. I want more ethical kills. I want quicker expiration. It's less stress on me as a hunter, and I think we all want to see shorter blood trails and more ethical kills. But it's not that way. It's not perfect every time. This is an insurance policy for me. Even though it's a little bit narrower of a cut, I don't mind because I'm fully aware of the capability of this arrow, especially with a heavier insert and a general sort of high-ish FOC build. I'm rocking about 550 grains. This goes through pretty much everything. And on a quartering away or a quartering two shot, if I have to tuck that arrow into an area where it has a further distance to travel before it makes it to the lungs, I will pick this every single time. Again, broadside through the ribs, this is the winner. Anything else, this has to be the winner for me. It's just more reliable, it can't go wrong, and it's going to pass through things much, much easier. So that does it for pros, cons, and what I've sort of coined as the X factor. Can you tell which broadhead I'm going to be using in the woods this year? It's going to have to be a fixed blade for me, specifically the Magnus Black Hornet, or really any Magnus offering is really good. I love their stingers and the stinger buzz cuts as well. My buddy killed his first buck ever last year with a stinger broadhead from Magnus, and I was there standing right next to him when he did it. And it was a really, really cool moment and an extremely short blood trail. Beautiful first buck as well. Now again, mechanicals, when they work, they freaking work, man. They are bloodbath type, like horror movie, really, really, really lethal to whitetails when they hit correctly. But again, they're variable targets. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what your nerves are going to do to you, what the pressure is going to do to you. And if you put a mechanical in the wrong spot, on the average, it is not going to perform as well as something like the Black Hornet from Magnus or any other fixed blade of quality material on the market today. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video and you like what you see on the channel, there's an icon right here to subscribe. And also, YouTube seems to think that you'd be interested in this video. So maybe click over here and check that one out as well. Also, the comment section is open for discussion. If you think I missed anything, you have any questions, hop it on in the comments and feel free to ask, and I'll get right back to you guys. Other than that, maybe drop a like on the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.